supposed to do the press kit. So my mom says, well, why don't you write a newspaper article? And I did. And when I gave it to her, she sent it, unbeknownst to me, to the North Shore News, which was a local newspaper here in Queens, and they printed it. And thus, a whole career started. And I'm calling my program A Love Affair with Blimps because it really is. Next month in June will be my 40th anniversary. You don't have to send cards. But I've been involved with Blimps for 40 years in June. And they're all because of Flushing Airport. And at that time, when the Blimps landed at Flushing Airport for the World's Fair, there were only 2 Blimps in the entire world. And I looked out my window, and lo and behold, I mean, I know some people here have the same view, but I would be able to watch Goodyear Blimps land and take off at Flushing Airport. And my interest became an obsession, and I became a noted historian, and I worked in the industry. Yes? Flushing Airport is like, you know where the stores are on 20th Avenue? That big empty field that everybody's protesting? That's where it is. But my talk today is about the airships in Queens. So let's go back a few years to 1918. And in 1918, we had a naval air station in Rockaway. And if you notice in the upper right-hand corner, you see like a building there, a large shed. And that was a shed that was used for airships. Now, to give you a perspective, the first Goodyear blimp flew in 1925. But back then, they had Army airships. And if you notice, the Army airships, the gondola didn't attach to the envelope. They hung down by cables. And this was the C-4 Army airship. And on this airship, underneath the gondola, they did an experiment. And they put a glider underneath the gondola. And they had a pilot go up with the airship. And they launched the glider with the pilot on board over Fort Tilden at about 3,000 feet, and they successfully landed. And that was the very first time an aircraft carried another aircraft successfully. Now today, Rockaway Naval Air Station is Jacob Reese Park. And if you notice from my picture, you'll see that there's absolutely no recognition of the fact that that was a naval aviation air station on that property. It's a shame because that was an important part of our heritage. The airships that were flying out of that base were protecting our coast. Now this is another picture of, this is North Beach Airport, which is now LaGuardia Airport. This is what Larry was talking about. And if you notice in the upper part of the picture, you'll see a blimp board there. And that was the energetic airship. And I judged from my history that this was taken in 1932. And in that year, the energetic airship tried to land on top of the Empire State Building, and they threw a mooring line down, and they held on for about 45 seconds before they had to let go because the winds were too strong. And it was the first and only airship to moor at the top of the Empire State Building, even though the Empire State Building was built to moor airships. And also, very interesting, if you notice the building on the right-hand side in the center, that writing on the top, it says Glenn Curtis. Glenn Curtis also had airplane operations at LaGuardia Airport, or North Beach Airport, back in the 30s. But there was another airport in Queens. Now this is LaGuardia Airport, the bottom, like late 1930s, but where I circled, that used to be an airport called Holmes Airport, or Holmes Field. Now Holmes Field is in Jackson Heights. And if you notice in the upper part of the picture, that's College Point, back at Flushing Bay. And you'll see there's a racetrack, there's a 1/5 mile racetrack. Goodyear had a lot of high hopes for operating their airships out of this base. But when I went to find out more history about Holmes Field, I went to the present owners, the current owners of the property. And the current owners of the property didn't even know that there was an airport there. They had no clue at all. And that's really a shame because we have 2 aviation facilities in Queens, and there's no heritage, no acknowledgement of the fact that this is our early heritage for aviation in Queens.
What's the boundary there now? Like, what's the other now? Like Northern Boulevard?
It's Northern Boulevard on one side, and then the Grand Central's, Home Expo and Boulevard.
Okay.
And then I think there's some apartment buildings on the corner where it used to be. And Goodyear built a hangar. And this is the first commercial airship hangar on the East Coast. And they operated an airship there all year long, even in the winter. It was always out there. They had people come out and they'd pay a fee, and they would have a ride. Now, Holmes Airport, there were very ambitious plans for this airport. They thought it was going to be a major airport, and this little slide here, this is a little snippet that I took from the brochure that they had on Holmes Airport, talking about the dirigible operations. And you can see they had high hopes for sky parties, dirigible sky parties, neon light advertising, and all this other things that I'm still proposing to this day. So everything old is new again. Yes? In other words, they have executives or people go up in the airship, and they'd have like champagne and be able to have a view of Manhattan. And it's really nice up there, especially on sunsets. And if you were lucky enough, you would get a ticket. And this ticket was from August of 1932. And I think, what was the price? $2.50? I'll pay $3. But this is what you get. You get a 4-page ticket, and you present it, and then you go up in the airship. And this is the same hangar, but it was repainted, and this is getting toward the end of the 1930s. And by this time, LaGuardia Airport was basically taken over, so they closed Holmes Airport. And this hangar was taken apart and transported to Peterborough, New Jersey, so that in the late 30s, Goodyear sent a fleet of airships to the 1939 World's Fair. So there were 3 airships that floated over the World's Fair, but they were operating from Peterborough Airport. Why they didn't use Flushing Airport, I don't know, because Flushing Airport was around since 1927, but this was their fleet. They probably needed more room, so they went to Peterborough, and they successfully operated there. But the commercial Goodyear blimps weren't the only blimps that visited the World's Fair. This is the opening day of the 1940 World's Fair. You can see one of the Navy airships was visiting and flying overhead. And airships did pay a lot of visits to that World's Fair, as commemorated in some of the souvenir postcards of the day. As I mentioned before, Flushing Airport was around since 1927, and on eBay I found a few pictures that were taken of Flushing Airport. The top picture was taken somewhere in the mid-40s, and if you notice, there's really no runways there yet. The runways weren't put in until apparently the 1950s, and here you can see 2 runways, not one, but Flushing Airport used to have 2 runways. But the secondary runway, the flight path, would take you right into the flight path of LaGuardia. So I remember in the late 50s, they stopped using that, and grass flew over it. And then when the Goodyear blimps came in the 1960s, that's when they started using that part of the field. My goodness. That's what I look like without a mustache. And so in 1964, I started hanging out. And what happened was, I emulated the crew so much that I started taking pieces of paper and with blue and yellow crayon, I would make patches just like the Goodyear guys would wear on their shirts. And my mom would sew them on, and we put the name on the shirt, so I looked just like the crewman. And I would stand at the airport, and I would give out brochures or little souvenir balloons or whatever, and answer people's questions, so that when they were having meetings or when the pilots wanted to relax in the office, people wouldn't bother them. And in exchange, I would get rides. So it was a real good deal for me.
You're a con man.
Oh, but it worked. And it was really fun to have the blimps at Flushing Airport. This is the blimp at Flushing Airport in 1969. And it came in 1969 for a very special mission. By the way, this is what happens at Flushing Airport. It is very wet. As a matter of fact, looking at this picture reminds me of walking around the grounds when the ship was flying and I was bored. And often was the time that there would be water shooting out of the ground. There would be natural geysers of clean water coming out of the ground. Or I'd see like little animals like turtles and frogs, snakes, beautiful birds like red-tailed pheasants. A lot of things live out there. It was like being in a zoo without a cage. I loved my experiences out of Flushing Airport, but it was very wet out there. Usually we wore boots. But in 1969, one of the reasons why the Goodyear blimp came to New York was to introduce a new night sign technology called the skytacular. And this consisted of a panel of 4 different colored lights, red, yellow, blue, green. And that was called a cluster. And the clusters were mounted on the side of the blimp with, there was like little pockets, little dimples, and you plug the lights in. And you'd start from the top row and you go all the way down. And when you're finished, voila, you have a beautiful like night sign which could do animations instead of just lettering, which was what Goodyear was using up until that point. And the funny thing about this particular night sign is that it had a very large, this is back in 1969, we didn't have computer devices back then, and it was a very large reader. And not only that, to power this big reader, we had to put a jet engine on at night to the blimp. So every night when the blimp flew, it was flying with a jet engine, which established 1 mile an hour thrust, but it was basically used for power, because the airship engines couldn't supply enough power for this particular nighttime. Now, I wasn't the only one that got obsessed with the blimps. I don't know if you could recognize the gentleman, the heavyset gentleman on the right. Does anybody recognize him? I know some people do. That is the gentleman who began the boy bands, Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, and O-Town. That's Lou Pearlman. Back when we were little kids, Lou and I were obsessed with the blimps. I built that little toy there out of a balloon that Goodyear was giving out. I made paper mache and cardboard and everything. I made a little blimp that we could play with and everything like that. But, you know, Lou wasn't satisfied. Nah, he wanted the real thing. So back in the late 70s, we discovered that there was a gentleman in Germany who was building airships very similar to the Goodyear blimp. And Lou and I contacted him. He came to the United States and we met with him. And we got a client. We got George as a client. But apparently, for some reason, we couldn't use the German blimp yet. So we had to import a blimp from a test pilot in California. We painted it up. And the Jordan company wanted it to be gold because they didn't want it to look like the Goodyear blimp. Well, when we made that gold paint had real gold flaking and other metals, and it was extremely heavy. It was like mixing metal with rubber cement, I remember as we were painting it. And it was so heavy that the blimp couldn't take off, so on its first maiden flight, it flew around for just a little while very low, and then it finally ended up in trees. But we didn't give up. Yes? Oh, no, there was no antenna back then. No, that was the thing later when, because that was back in the 1930s, and the TV really didn't come into the 50s and 60s. No, they didn't have towers back then, because they really wanted the blimps to land there originally, but it was just too impractical. But we didn't give up, because after the George Ash blimp, we established another company called Airship International Limited. And this postcard, the artist who drew this came to my apartment. And what she did is, this is her concept of what the blimp would look like if you were looking out my window with a telephoto lens with the blimp over Flushing Airport and the city in the background. So that's what she wanted to do. And in 1985, we built the McDonald's blimp. Now this blimp was the first blimp in the United States from Germany since the Hindenburg. And we built it right at Lakehurst. So it was kind of a historical event for us. And it took us, we started building the blimp in June, and we didn't launch it until August because it took a lot of work to put it all together. Our night sign was exactly like the Goodyear night sign, and it takes a long time to just put that on the blimp. We painted it ourselves, we did everything ourselves, and we flew around for quite a number of months. Yes? The lights, when we put the lights on, there are cups that are glued onto the envelope in rows, and then when we're in the hangar, we'd start, like on this side, we would start on the left side, and the other side we'd start at the nose, and we'd go and we'd work across, and each row, we'd put in a row, and then we'd make sure that the cabling would be in a certain area. Then we'd go to the next row, and we'd put the cabling in. So it's a very long process, because there's like 5,600 lights on it. It takes a while. And then we went on tour. Now we started our tour off in New York, that's the picture on the upper left, and then we went across the country. We went, that picture in the center and at the top is Dulles Airport. Then of course you recognize the Arch of St. Louis. Then we went and traveled in the Southwest, and we toured in New Mexico and Arizona. And then when we got to California, in Palm Springs, we came across the Goodyear blimp. So we shared an airport with the Goodyear blimp. And it was the first time that crew ever saw a blimp other than a Goodyear blimp, and they were fascinated, especially because we used leather straps to put the fins on and other little technologies that were different. And then we were in Louisiana, in Baton Rouge, and I took that, they gave me a flight on a helicopter. So I got to fly all around the blimp, and I was taking pictures and videos and everything. It was the coolest thing. And then that picture in the bottom center is one of my favorite stops. It was in New Mexico, called Deming, New Mexico. It was a really nice, small town. Then we came back to New York, and that picture on the bottom right is the picture that was taken when we were crossing the finish line for the Great Blimp Race of 1986, which was on July 4th. There were 5 blimps in the blimp race here in New York. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but it was quite a day. And there were 2 Goodyear blimps, so New York had 7 blimps at that time. That can never happen right now because there's not enough parking spots for blimps. After we finished with the McDonald's contract, we went back to Lakehurst, New Jersey, and now we're in the famous Hindenburg hangar, hangar number 1. That's that big hangar that you always see on the TV documentaries. And we started painting the blimp over, and we painted it to be the SeaWorld blimp. And this was the first blimp that Bert Dodge painted. We needed somebody to come in to paint the blimp, because when we painted the McDonald's blimp, the McDonald's basically was stenciling that we put on the ship, and we just traced it. But in this case, we couldn't do that with SeaWorld. So we had a billboard artist come in, and Bert Dodge came in, and I remember I was standing next to him when he first walked into the hangar, and he goes, "No way." I said, "Wait, it's your job, man." And he did it, and he did a beautiful job. And he's painted about 20 blimps since then, including the Fuji blimp, which you see flying over the tennis matches every year. He painted that all by hand. And we took that on a tour from 86 to 87, and we went across the country. And the upper left-hand picture is us in San Diego. And then I was in an airplane taking a picture in Kissimmee, Florida. And then that was the picture in the center on the left. It's the last time any airship used Dulles Airport. Because after that, they paved all that over for the airplanes. So that was our last visit, friendly visit to Washington. Other than that, we had a park really far away. And then there's this, we were selling souvenirs of the SeaWorld blimp, and that's a souvenir stand that SeaWorld made for the souvenirs. And that traveled with us. In other words, when we were out in Texas, that went to Texas. When we were in San Diego, that went to San Diego. The bottom left pictures of the greeting card that SeaWorld made up with the blimp. And then, of course, the bottom right, the sunset of that contract.